Before we start the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers.
The fluorescent lights buzzed above as the faint hum of a shopping cart wheel scraped across the linoleum floor. It was just another mundane Tuesday at Harper's Market, where the scent of fresh bread mingled with the tang of cleaning solution. The usual assortment of customers shuffled in and out, and the shelves stood tall, brimming with neatly stacked cans and boxes. But for Sarah, today was different. Sarah had worked here for almost a year now. At 22, it wasn't the dream job, but it paid the bills. More than that, it gave her a brief respite from the weight of her student loans, the pressure from her parents, and the gnawing sense that she wasn't doing enough with her life. She kept her head down, wore her name tag with the practiced ease of someone who had long stopped hoping for a promotion and went through the motions, but then she heard it. Excuse me, I need someone who actually knows what they're doing." The voice was sharp, cutting through the chatter of the aisles like a knife. It wasn't the first time someone had raised their voice in frustration. Customers had a tendency to forget that employees weren't magicians, but this voice was different. It was laced with contempt, a sneer of entitlement in every syllable. Sarah looked up from her station behind the deli counter, where she had been carefully slicing ham. Her eyes scanned the store, and that's when she saw her. A woman stood at the end of the produce aisle, hands on her hips, staring down at the disorganized pile of tomatoes as if she had just found a grave injustice. She was well-dressed, expensive-looking, with a designer handbag dangling from one arm and a pair of large sunglasses perched atop her head. Her posture screamed authority, as if she were accustomed to being obeyed without question. The woman's gaze flicked toward Sarah, and the look she gave her was more like an inspection than a glance. "You!" she called, raising her voice just enough for the entire aisle to hear. "Are you the manager?" Sarah's stomach sank. There was no doubt about it. This was going to be one of those days. "No, ma'am," Sarah answered, forcing a smile and trying to remain professional. "But I can get the manager for you." No, I don't need a manager," the woman said, her tone dripping with condescension. "I need someone competent, someone who knows what they're doing." Sarah's smile faltered, but she kept her composure. "I'll be happy to help you, ma'am. What seems to be the issue?" The woman gestured grandly toward the tomatoes, as if they were the root of some grave conspiracy. "These are all mislabeled," she declared. "The sign says one price, but these are clearly not what they're supposed to be. Do you know how long I've been waiting for someone to come fix this? And look at this mess. How does anyone expect to shop here with such incompetent employees?" She sneered as she eyed Sarah from head to toe. A wave of heat rushed to Sarah's face. She had been expecting an angry customer, sure, but this was something else. This was more than frustration. It was disdain, laced with the unshakable conviction that Sarah was somehow beneath this woman. She swallowed her frustration and stepped forward. "I'm sorry for the confusion, ma'am. I can check the price for you and make sure everything is correct." "No," the woman interrupted, her voice rising. "I don't want your apologies. I want this fixed now. This store is clearly going downhill. How could you let this happen?" Sarah bit her lip, trying to keep the irritation from bubbling to the surface. She had been working this job long enough to know that some people just weren't going to be satisfied, no matter how much effort you put into it. But something about this woman's tone, the way she dismissed Sarah as if she were a mere obstacle in her way, stirred something deeper inside her. A feeling she hadn't expected to surface. A feeling of injustice. "Ma'am," Sarah said, forcing her voice to stay calm, "I'm happy to assist you, but I'm going to have to call someone to verify the price on these tomatoes." The woman didn't even wait for Sarah to finish speaking. "Unbelievable," she muttered, loud enough for everyone in the aisle to hear. "I don't have time for this. Just get the manager, now." Her voice was filled with venom, and before Sarah could even take another step, the woman snapped, "I demand to speak to someone who knows how to do their job. This is outrageous." The word stung. Sarah felt the heat of embarrassment rise in her chest as she quickly walked toward the front of the store to fetch the manager. She tried to block out the woman's voice, mocking, belittling, tearing through the store, but it was impossible. Every step felt heavier, the sense of humiliation pressing down on her. As Sarah approached the front desk, she saw Greg, the store manager, glancing through some paperwork. His eyes met hers as she approached, and she could already feel the resignation in his expression. "Greg," Sarah said, voice tight, "there's a customer who needs your help. She's unhappy about the tomatoes." Greg sighed, standing up and stretching his back. "Another one of those, huh?" "Yeah," Sarah muttered. She's really going off." Greg nodded, his lips tight. He'd seen this before. The entitled customer who thought they could bully their way into getting whatever they wanted. He was used to dealing with them. Or at least, that's what he liked to think. "All right, I'll handle it." But as Sarah stepped back into the aisles, she couldn't shake the sense of foreboding that lingered in the air. The customer, Karen as it turned out, was waiting for Greg at the front of the store, still fuming, still ready to make her next demand. Sarah couldn't help but wonder, what would happen if she just walked away from it all? It would be so easy to quit, to leave this all behind. But she couldn't. Not yet. She watched as Greg approached Karen, her voice still carrying through the aisles. Sarah could feel it. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning. Greg approached Karen slowly, his expression already betraying the tension he felt. He was no stranger to irate customers, but Karen's posture, the way she stood with her arms crossed, her gaze fixed on him like he was the problem, sent a sharp wave of discomfort through him. He could already feel the weight of her presence, the kind that demanded immediate attention, as if every minute wasted in this conversation would cost him. "Ma'am, I'm Greg, the manager here. How can I help you?" He offered a small, practiced smile. His words were calm, professional, yet there was an undercurrent of exhaustion beneath them. He had dealt with enough entitled customers in his time at Harper's Market to know that there was no winning when it came to people like Karen. Her eyes flicked over him, taking in his rumpled uniform and the fatigue lining his face. "Finally," she snapped, "someone who can actually take care of things. This store is a mess, and I demand to speak with someone who knows how to run it." Greg felt his smile falter slightly, but he forced it to stay intact. "I'm very sorry for the inconvenience, ma'am. What seems to be the issue?" Karen's face twisted in disdain as she pointed at the tomatoes. "The prices are wrong. Your staff," she gestured vaguely, "can't even get that right. I've been waiting for over 10 minutes for someone to come fix this, and what do I get? A bunch of kids who don't know how to do their jobs." Greg tried not to let her words get to him, but the sting was hard to ignore. He had always done his best to keep things running smoothly, to stay on top of every problem that arose, no matter how small. But here she was, belittling not just him but Sarah, who was doing the best she could under the circumstances. He glanced over at Sarah, who stood a few feet away, visibly uncomfortable as she watched the interaction. He didn't need to look at her for long to know she was on the verge of breaking. Karen's words were cruel, cutting deeper than just an argument over tomatoes. It was personal. It always was with people like her. "Let's just get this sorted out," Greg said, trying to redirect the conversation. "I'll make sure the price is corrected and—" "No," Karen cut him off, her voice rising. "I want more than that. This isn't just about tomatoes. This is about the fact that I've been coming here for years, and I've never had such a disgraceful experience. The service is appalling. I want a refund for the entire order, and I want a voucher for the trouble." Greg's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, he considered telling her no. He'd seen customers like her before. People who thought that making unreasonable demands would somehow get them what they wanted. But that was a risk. One wrong move, and he knew it could get ugly. Corporate was always watching, always looking for complaints, and Karen seemed the type to call in every favor she had. "Okay, I understand you're upset," Greg said, his voice tightening with the effort to remain calm. "But we have policies in place." "I don't care about your policies," Karen shouted, her voice cutting through the store like a blade. "You'll do what I say, or I'll make sure everyone knows about how your employees are disrespectful and incompetent." Sarah watched from the corner of her eye, her pulse quickening. It was happening again. Karen's demands weren't just about the tomatoes anymore. This was about asserting power, about making sure everyone knew she could get whatever she wanted, whenever she wanted. And Greg, despite his best efforts, was folding under the pressure. Greg cleared his throat, his mind racing. He could already hear Karen's next words, the inevitable complaint to corporate, the bad review online, the social media post that would make her a viral sensation. All of it would fall on him and the store. Sarah could see the cracks forming in his facade. "I'll get you your refund, ma'am," Greg said, his voice strained. "But we're going to need to take a look at your receipt first." Karen's eyes glittered with the satisfaction of having made him bend. She fished through her purse, pulling out a crumpled receipt and shoving it into Greg's hands with a flourish. "I expect this to be resolved immediately. And I'll be keeping an eye on your employees," she added, casting a sneer toward Sarah, who was standing a few feet away. "If this doesn't go exactly as I want, I'll make sure you regret it." Greg's fingers gripped the receipt a little too tightly. He looked at Sarah, but she didn't meet his eyes. She was too busy pretending to focus on the cans in front of her, pretending she wasn't witnessing the slow unraveling of yet another customer encounter. Greg didn't blame her for looking away. The tension in the air was thick, suffocating. He was being forced to placate Karen in the hopes of avoiding a bigger problem. But deep down he knew it wouldn't be enough. Nothing ever was. As he processed the refund, he could feel Karen's eyes on him, waiting. Sarah's quiet footsteps behind him told him she was trying to disappear into the background, trying to avoid the spotlight. But it was impossible. Karen had already made it clear she didn't think Sarah was worthy of the position she held. Sarah had been on the receiving end of Karen's venom since the moment their paths had crossed, and it wasn't going to stop now. Greg handed Karen the refund, hoping that would be the end of it. But of course it wasn't. "And," Karen said, her voice dripping with venom, "I'm going to be posting about this, all over social media. You'll be sorry you ever treated me this way. Mark my words." She turned on her heel, marching, out of the store like she'd just won a battle, leaving Greg and Sarah standing in the wake of her storm. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The store seemed quieter in her absence, as though the air had cleared, but the damage lingered. Sarah could feel it in her chest, something between anger and defeat. The worst part wasn't the way Karen had acted. It was the way she had made Sarah feel. Small, insignificant, invisible. Greg let out a long breath, turning to Sarah. "I'm sorry about that," he said, though the apology felt weak, almost meaningless. Sarah forced a smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "It's fine. I'll get back to work." But as Karen's words echoed in her mind, "I'll make sure you regret it," Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was coming. Something she wasn't prepared for, but couldn't avoid. And in that moment, she made a decision. She wasn't going to let this go. Not this time. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The next few days passed in a blur of tension. Sarah tried to push the encounter with Karen to the back of her mind, but the memory lingered, clawing at her thoughts like a persistent itch. Every time she walked into the store, she expected Karen's face to be there, staring at her with that same look of disdain. But it wasn't just that. It was the feeling, the anger simmering just below the surface, the unfairness of it all. The way Karen had crushed her confidence without even realizing it, or maybe without caring. But the real shock came when Sarah checked her phone on her lunch break. There it was, right on the store's social media page, a post from Karen, complete, with an exaggerated caption and a blurry picture of the tomatoes she had been so upset about. It was framed with a story that made it seem like Harper's Market was some kind of unsanitary, unprofessional establishment that had no regard for customer service. And that wasn't even the worst part. The post was already going viral. Under the post, Karen had tagged the store's official page, demanding that the issue be addressed publicly. She had even included a hashtag, "Shame on you, Harper Market." There were already hundreds of comments, many from people who had never stepped foot inside the store, all echoing Karen's claims. Sarah's stomach twisted into knots as she scrolled through the comments. "I can't believe this is how they treat people," one read. How are they still in business? Another commented. The more she read, the more her anger rose. This wasn't just an isolated incident, it was a full-on attack. Karen had weaponized her social media following, turning what had been a petty argument into a public smear campaign. But it was the final comment that stopped Sarah in her tracks. I'm never shopping here again. Who would want to give their money to a place like this? That one had come from someone she recognized, her cousin Jenna, who worked at the local coffee shop. Jenna had always been supportive, always had. Sarah's back. To see her add fuel to the fire cut deeper than anything Karen could have said. Sarah set the phone down, her hands trembling slightly. This was more than just an inconvenience. This was personal. And the more she thought about it, the more she realized how much Karen's attack had impacted her. It wasn't just about the tomatoes, it was about everything. The way Karen had belittled her, reduced her to nothing in front of the entire store, in front of Greg, and now in front of the world. A rush of anger flooded Sarah's chest. She couldn't let this go. Not like this. She had to do something. She wasn't going to just let Karen's cruelty slip through the cracks like it always did. She couldn't. It wasn't just about the store's reputation anymore. It was about her pride, her dignity, and she wasn't going to let Karen destroy that. That night, Sarah lay awake, replaying the interaction over and over in her mind. There was something in her that snapped. She wasn't going to let Karen get away with this. If Karen wanted a fight, Sarah was going to give her one. But this time, it wasn't going to be a petty argument about tomatoes. It was going to be something bigger, something smarter. Her mind raced as ideas began to form. Social media. She could use it too. She wasn't going to be the victim anymore. She would turn the tables. But how? The answer came to her as she remembered something. She had seen Karen's profile on the store's post, and with a little digging, she was able to pull up her full name, Karen Thompson. Her social media accounts were public, just the kind of thing Sarah needed to expose her. And then it hit her. The key wasn't just about outing Karen for being a terrible customer. It was about showing everyone just how much of a hypocrite she truly was. The next day, Sarah spent her lunch break browsing Karen's accounts. It didn't take long before she found something that made her smile. Karen had posted pictures from a recent vacation to a luxurious resort. In the comments, she had bragged about how the resort had offered her a VIP experience and how she had been treated like royalty. It was just the kind of boastful, self-important post that screamed entitlement. It was perfect. Sarah snapped a screenshot and set to work crafting the post that would turn the tables. She would tell the truth, but in a way that would expose Karen for what she really was, a spoiled, self-centered individual who used her social media following to bully others. It wasn't just about the tomatoes anymore. This was about making sure people saw Karen for what she was, a bully who would stop at nothing to get her way. Her heart raced as she finished the post, reading it over and over, making sure every word was just right. It wasn't just a post, it was a weapon. One that would get Karen's attention, make her regret ever crossing paths with Sarah. You know what's really outrageous? Sarah typed, her fingers moving swiftly across the keyboard. People who think they can ruin someone's day because they didn't get what they wanted. Yesterday, I had the pleasure of dealing with a customer at Harper's Market who couldn't handle a little confusion over the price of tomatoes. So she decided to take to social media and paint the entire store as unprofessional and irresponsible. But what she didn't mention is the fact that she's a regular at a high-end resort, where she flaunts her VIP status and expects the world to cater to her every whim. If you're going to call out a business for bad service, maybe you should start by looking in the mirror. Sarah hesitated for only a moment before hitting send. The post went live, and almost immediately it started gathering attention. It wasn't just people from Harper's Market who saw it. It spread to Karen's followers, who were quick to comment. Some supported Sarah, others defended Karen, but the seeds of doubt had been planted. And then, just as she had hoped, Karen's response came. It was angry, defensive, and filled with the same self-righteous tone that Sarah had become all too familiar with. She had underestimated Sarah, She had made the mistake of thinking Sarah would let it slide, that Sarah wouldn't fight back. But she was wrong. This was only the beginning. The gloves were off now and Sarah wasn't going to back down, not this time. The fallout from Sarah's post was immediate and intense. Karen's social media followers were quick to rally behind her, many spouting the same entitled rhetoric that had defined her in the first place. But what surprised Karen most was the backlash she hadn't anticipated. The people who weren't fooled by her facade, who saw through the polished exterior and recognized her for what she truly was. The comments flooded in, some supporting Karen's claims, but just as many defending Sarah, even the store itself. "You're not a VIP. You're just a bully," one comment read. Another chimed in, "Funny how you post about being treated like royalty, but can't even treat retail workers with basic decency. Get over yourself, Karen." Sarah could hardly contain her satisfaction as she watched the post gain traction. It was working. People were starting to see Karen for what she was, and the irony of it all wasn't lost on her. Karen had tried to destroy her reputation, and instead Sarah was turning the tables, exposing Karen's hypocrisy for the world to see. But the real twist came when Karen, in all her arrogance, decided to respond. The post was long and filled with righteous indignation, her fingers furiously typing as if she were entitled to a public apology. She couldn't stand the idea of someone standing up to her, much less publicly humiliating her. And so, in an attempt to regain control, Karen tried to escalate the situation. "You'll regret this," she wrote, her words dripping with venom. "I'm going to expose your lies and make sure everyone knows what kind of disgusting, unprofessional people work at Harper's Market. I have connections and I'm not afraid to use them." Sarah's heart raced as she read the post. This wasn't just a challenge, it was a threat. And for a brief moment, doubt crept in. What had she started? What would Karen do next? But then Sarah reminded herself of something she had known all along. Karen had underestimated her. She wasn't going to cower in fear. Not now. Greg had stayed quiet, watching the social media storm unfold from the sidelines. He had known Sarah wasn't one to back down, but he hadn't expected her to go public with the fight. Deep down he admired her resilience, but now, with Karen's threat looming over them, he could feel the weight of the situation pressing on him. He had always been the one to smooth things over, to calm the waters. But this time he wasn't sure how to fix it. The damage was done. The tension in the store was palpable the next morning as Sarah arrived for her shift. She had expected things to die down by now, but instead, they seemed to escalate. The gossip among the other employees was deafening, with whispers about Karen's connections and what she might do next. Some of them were afraid, while others were eager for the drama to play out. But for Sarah, it wasn't about the gossip. It was about the truth. She couldn't let Karen walk away unscathed after everything she had put her through, and she wasn't going to give in to fear. That's when the email came. It was from corporate. Sarah opened it, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew this moment was coming. The company had always been quick to distance itself from public controversies, and she had no doubt that they were going to side with Karen in an attempt to avoid bad press. But instead of the expected reprimand or apology, Sarah found herself reading a different kind of message. "We've reviewed the situation, and after careful consideration, we believe your actions have been justified. We're not going to allow one customer's behavior to undermine the hard work of our employees. We've also received an overwhelming amount of support from customers and other staff members who've shared their experiences. We've decided to stand by you." It took a moment for the words to sink in. For all the tension, all the doubt that had been building inside her, Sarah realized she had won. Not only had she exposed Karen's true nature, but now she had the support of the very people who had once been hesitant to speak out. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her out of the moment. It was a message from Greg. "Meet me outside after your shift. We need to talk." Confusion gripped her as she pocketed the phone. What could he want? Had corporate finally decided to intervene? Was he about to tell her that they had to back down? But when she stepped outside at the end of her shift, it wasn't Greg who greeted her first. It was Karen. The audacity of it took Sarah by surprise. Karen stood there, arms folded, her face twisted in that same smug expression, as if she were still in control. But this time Sarah wasn't intimidated. "You think you've won, don't you?" Karen sneered, her voice dripping with contempt. "But you've only just begun to see what I can do. This isn't over." Sarah stood her ground, every inch of her posture radiating defiance. "You're wrong, it's over, and you're the one who's lost." Karen's eyes flickered with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," she spat. Before Sarah could respond, Greg stepped forward, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the seething hostility radiating from Karen. He looked at Sarah, then back at Karen. "It's over, Karen," he said, his voice firm. "We've got all the support we need. You've made your point, and now you've made your bed. You can't bully your way through this." Karen's face flushed crimson as the realization hit her. She had underestimated the power of social media, and more importantly, she had underestimated Sarah. The world had seen her for who she really was, and now her reputation, so carefully crafted, so meticulously maintained, was in tatters. With a final glare, Karen turned and stormed off, disappearing into the parking lot. But Sarah didn't feel victorious. Not yet. She had exposed the truth, but the satisfaction came from knowing she had reclaimed her own power. She had fought back, and won not with force or manipulation, but with cleverness and resilience. Greg turned to Sarah, offering a small smile. "You did good," he said simply, his words carrying more weight than any grand speech could. And as they stood there, watching Karen's retreating figure, Sarah realized that she had won not just the battle, but the war. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about standing up for what was right. It was about proving that even in the face of injustice, there was always a way to turn the tide. And for the first time in a long while, Sarah felt like she was finally in control of her own story.